Picture this for a moment. You are sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, maybe with a cup of coffee going cold beside you, and you do a little mental accounting. Nothing formal, just the kind of quiet arithmetic that happens when the house is still and you have a few minutes to yourself. You start with the house. You know what the Zillow estimate says. You have checked it more than once, maybe more than you would admit. The number has climbed nicely over the past few years, and it sits there in your mind like a solid, reassuring fact. Then you add the retirement account. It is not where you want it to be, but it exists and it has grown, and you feel okay about the direction it is heading. Maybe you add the cars, the savings account, whatever's sitting in checking. You do a rough subtraction for the mortgage balance and maybe a car payment or two, and you arrive at a number. And that number feels pretty good. Maybe not rich exactly, but solid, respectable. The kind of number that lets you exhale a little. You are not behind. You are doing all right. You close the mental tab and go back to your Sunday. Here's the thing nobody tells you about that moment. The number you just calculated is not wrong exactly, but it's not telling you the whole truth either. It's showing you a version of your financial life that looks more complete and more stable than the one that would actually show up when you need it most. And the gap between those two versions, the number in your head and the number that would actually be there for you, is where a lot of very smart, very hardworking people quietly get blindsided.
Net worth is one of the most important numbers in personal finance, and also one of the most misunderstood. Not because the math is complicated, the math is simple. Assets minus liabilities equals net worth. What makes it misleading is everything the simple version leaves out. Today, I want to walk you through exactly what your net worth calculation is probably getting wrong, what the honest version of that number looks like, and the specific distortions that make people feel wealthier on paper than they actually are in practice. No judgment, no alarm, just the clearer picture, because you cannot make good decisions from a number that is quietly flattering you. Let us start at the beginning, with what net worth is actually supposed to measure and where the standard version starts going sideways. The idea behind net worth is straightforward. Add up everything you own that has value, subtract everything you owe. The remainder is yours. It's the financial equivalent of asking what would be left if you settled every debt you have today and converted everything you own into cash. In theory, it is an honest snapshot of where you stand. In practice, most people calculate it in a way that answers a slightly different question. They calculate what things are worth on paper right now, not what would actually be available to them if real life interrupted their plan. And that distinction between paper value and practical value is where the lying begins. Take a person I want you to picture named David. David is 52. He earns a comfortable salary, has owned his home for 14 years, and has been contributing to his 401k since his early 30s. When David sits down to calculate his net worth, he arrives at something close to $680,000. That number makes him feel genuinely secure. He has told himself for years that if he could just get his net worth past $500,000, he would know he was going to be okay. He cleared that bar. He feels okay. What David has not done is look carefully at what that $680,000 is actually made of. And when you do look carefully, the picture gets more complicated in ways that matter a great deal for how the rest of his working life goes. We will come back to David, because by the end of this, his number is going to look quite different. Not smaller, necessarily, but more honest. And honest is the only version of a number you can actually build a plan around.
The first and biggest distortion in most American net worth calculations is also the most invisible because it sits inside the thing most people are proudest of, the house. Home equity is real. I want to be clear about that up front, because this is not an argument that your house has no value. It does. But the way most people count that equity in their net worth quietly overstates how available and how useful that wealth actually is. And for the average American household, where home equity represents the single largest component of total net worth, getting this wrong can mean operating on a fundamentally false sense of security for years. Here is the distortion. When you add your home's current estimated value to your net worth calculation and subtract the mortgage balance, you are treating your home equity as if it is cash sitting in an account you could access tomorrow. It is not. Home equity is one of the least liquid forms of wealth that exists. To convert it into spendable money, you have essentially three options. You can sell the house, which costs you roughly 6% of the sale price in agent commissions alone, before closing costs, transfer taxes, and the repairs buyers will ask for on the way out. You can take out a home equity loan or line of credit, which puts you back into debt and adds a monthly payment to your life. Or you can do a cash-out refinance, which resets your mortgage and often at a higher rate than the one you currently have. None of those options are quick, simple, or free, and none of them are available to you on the Tuesday afternoon when something goes wrong and you actually need the money. There is a second layer to the home equity distortion that almost nobody thinks about until they are forced to. The value your home shows on Zillow is an estimate based on recent sales of similar properties in your area. It is not an appraisal. It is not an offer. It is a number generated by an algorithm looking at comparable data, and it carries a margin of error that can run into the tens of thousands of dollars in either direction. The actual price your home would fetch tomorrow, after a real buyer walks through it, after an inspector finds the things an inspector always finds, after the negotiation that every real estate transaction involves, is almost certainly different from the number sitting on your screen. Sometimes lower, occasionally higher, but never exactly that. And then there's the cost of selling itself. If David's home is worth $420,000 and he has a remaining mortgage balance of $180,000, his paper equity is $240,000. But if he sold the home, a 6% commission eats $25,200 right off the top. Closing costs, repairs, and concessions to the buyer might take another $8,000 to $12,000. He walks away with somewhere closer to $200,000, not $240,000. He was counting $40,000 that was never really his to spend.
Now multiply that across an entire household net worth where home equity is the dominant asset, and you can see how quickly the paper number and the real number begin to separate. A named character worth meeting here is Patricia. She is 57. Her home has appreciated dramatically over the past decade, and her equity on paper sits at $310,000. She has $95,000 in a 401k and about $18,000 in a savings account. Her total net worth by standard calculation is $423,000. She feels like she is in decent shape. What Patricia has not fully absorbed is that $310,000 of her $423,000 net worth is sitting inside walls she has to live in. It is not investable. It is not growing in a way that compounds for her retirement, and accessing any meaningful portion of it requires either selling her home or taking on new debt. Her actual, liquid, accessible, investable wealth is $113,000. That is the number her retirement plan needs to be built around, and $113,000 at 57, with a retirement less than a decade away, tells a very different story than $423,000 does. The second distortion is quieter, but just as common. It is the problem of depreciating assets wearing the costume of wealth. When most people calculate their net worth, they include the market value of their cars, sometimes their furniture, their jewelry, whatever significant possessions they own that seem to have value. And technically, those things do have value, but they have a specific kind of value that makes them very different from a retirement account or a brokerage balance. They go down, and they go down predictably, reliably, and without stopping until they reach zero or close to it. A car you bought for $42,000 3 years ago might be worth $28,000 today if you are lucky. In 3 more years, it might be worth $17,000. The trajectory only moves in one direction. Including it in your net worth at current market value is accurate as a snapshot, but it creates a false impression of stability. That $28,000 is not going to grow into $35,000 by the time you need it. It is going to shrink into $10,000. Net worth that is partially composed of depreciating assets is eroding in real time, even when the total number holds steady or climbs slightly, because the climbing parts are having to outpace the sinking ones just to keep you even.
There is a version of this trap that catches people who own boats, recreational vehicles, timeshares, and vacation properties that bleed money every month. They count these as assets at estimated market value. What they are not subtracting is the ongoing cost of holding them. A boat worth $35,000 that costs $4,000 a year in storage, insurance, and maintenance is not really a $35,000 asset. It is a $35,000 asset with a leak in it. The honest version of that boat in your net worth calculation might be closer to what you could sell it for tomorrow, which is almost always less than what you paid and less than what any valuation website will tell you, minus the carrying costs that are going to keep coming whether or not you ever use it again. I am not suggesting you should not own these things if they bring genuine value to your life. I am suggesting you should be honest with yourself about what they are contributing to your wealth picture and what they are quietly taking from it. The third distortion involves debt, specifically the debt people forget to subtract or choose not to look at too closely because the number makes the net worth calculation uncomfortable. The standard net worth formula says assets minus liabilities. Most people are reasonably honest about the mortgage because it is large and impossible to ignore, but the full ledger of liabilities tends to get fuzzy around the edges. Car loans are sometimes half-remembered, the home equity line of credit that got opened for the kitchen renovation and never quite paid off, the personal loan that is almost done, the credit card balances that sit somewhere between 0 and a number the person would rather not say out loud, medical debt that is technically on a payment plan and therefore feels resolved even though the balance is still there, student loans that have been in deferment long enough that they feel like background noise rather than real obligations. Every one of those balances is a liability. Every one of them belongs in the subtraction column of an honest net worth calculation. And when people skip them or round them down or simply do not add them up, the net worth number they arrive at is inflated by exactly the amount they chose not to count.